I know a lot of our listeners are international medical graduates or healthcare professionals aiming to work abroad, and the OET Occupational English Test shows up as a pretty big deal. Have you noticed how much anxiety people have around that grade B benchmark?
Oh, absolutely. That minimum score of 350 inches every section can sound daunting, especially since it's tied directly to your ability to practice in English-speaking countries. But honestly, once you crack the structure of the test and know where to put your energy, it's way less mysterious than people think.
That's such a good point. I think a lot of the fear comes from not knowing what you're up against. But let's break it down section by section, starting with understanding what makes OET unique compared to other English tests.
One thing that makes OET so different is that everything is medical. Every reading, listening, or writing task is built around healthcare scenarios. So it's not just general English, it's medical English in action.
Yeah, you're not just reading about random topics or writing essays about pollution. You're listening to patient consultations, writing referral letters, and interpreting policies, all stuff you'd actually do on the job.
Exactly. But that also means if you're not comfortable with medical English, or if you haven't practiced these types of tasks, it can feel tricky even if your general English is strong. That's why an early mock test can be a game changer.
I love that you brought up mock tests. Let's dive into why taking one early matters so much. I hear people say, I'll try a mock test when I feel more ready, but waiting can backfire. Jumping in early, especially with reading and listening, really helps pinpoint strengths and weaknesses.
Totally agree. Even if your score is lower than you want, it's so valuable to see where you struggle. Like, if you get 25 out of 42 inches reading, that's not failure. It's a clear roadmap for what to work on next.
And those self-checked sections make it easy to track progress without always needing a teacher. Plus, there's something motivating about seeing numbers improve over time.
And it highlights which basic skills need upgrading, so you don't waste hours on areas you're already solid in. Speaking of reading, let's dig into why Part C trips up so many candidates. I've met so many people who breeze through Parts A and B, then just hit a wall in Part C. The abstract language and those sneaky answer choices really test your comprehension.
Absolutely. It's not just about knowing medical words, it's about spotting how words like however or despite totally flip a sentence's meaning. Sometimes it's the little connectors that trip you up more than the vocabulary.
That's why, if your score is stuck below 26, it's usually a sign to rebuild your foundation. In fact, I often suggest switching to IELTS reading for a bit.
Funny you mention IELTS. It's such a solid way to boost general skills before coming back to OET's medical focus. IELTS has a ton of reading resources, and aiming for a 6.5 or 7 there usually sets you up for much better results in OET. It's like cross-training for your brain.
Exactly. And once you're back to OET, it's not just about practice tests. The real secret sauce is explaining your answers, literally saying out loud why you picked one option over another.
That method is so underrated. It forces you to engage with the subtleties, not just skim for keywords. Plus, it gets you used to OET's tricky distractors.
And let's not forget, medical vocabulary isn't everything. Those little linking words can completely change a question's meaning. Switching gears, OET listening is where people often lose points simply because they miss a few words in those dictation-style questions. Word-for-word accuracy really matters here.
Dictation practice is like putting your listening under a microscope. Play a sentence, write it out, and you'll instantly spot whether you're missing things because of speed, unfamiliar words, or maybe linked sounds.
I love that you mentioned linking sounds. English speakers blend words in ways that aren't obvious if you're used to textbook audio. Training your ear to those patterns makes a huge difference.
Once you master dictation, moving on to imitation and shadowing helps you really internalize natural speech. But if scores are still low, it might be time for a detour through IELTS listening. IELTS listening is like the training wheels for OET clearer audio, a bit slower and less specialized vocabulary. It's a safe place to build confidence if you're stuck below 22 inches OET.
But it's important to remember, getting a great IELTS score doesn't guarantee OET success. I've seen people ace IELTS but still struggle with medical-specific dialogues or fast-paced dictation.
And every listening transcript can double as speaking practice. I always tell students role-play those dialogues out loud. You're sharpening 2 skills at once.
Absolutely. Plus, acting out those scripts builds the exact kind of communication OET wants to see in speaking. Let's face it, speaking is where nerves kick in for a lot of test takers. The role play card looks simple until you're on the spot and suddenly blank out or over explain.
I've watched candidates get tangled up trying to sound too technical, using jargon like myocardial infarction instead of just saying heart attack. But OET tests if you can explain things clearly to a patient, not another doctor.
Exactly. And that's where reading aloud like a broadcaster, even if it feels silly, helps nail down English rhythm and stress. Short, simple sentences keep your thoughts organized and your language clean.
If all else fails, practicing everyday conversations through IELTS speaking or online lessons can make a surprising difference, especially if you're not used to thinking on your feet in English. There's something really effective about picking a listening part A dialogue, then turning around and role-playing it yourself. It reinforces vocabulary, structure, and that natural give and take.
That's my go-to activity for shy speakers. You get both the language input and the chance to practice responding, which is exactly what happens on test day.
And the more comfortable you get with these role plays, the less likely you are to freeze or go off script during the actual OET speaking section. It's all about building muscle memory.
Which brings us to writing, because clarity and focus matter just as much there. I see so many candidates obsess over grammar in OET writing when actually most of the scoring is about whether your letter is relevant, concise, and clearly organised.
That's so true. If you don't understand the purpose of the letter or what the recipient needs to know, even perfect grammar won't save you. Templates help, but only if you adapt them to each scenario.
And practicing with IELTS writing can be a great base. Once you're comfortable hitting a 6 or 6.5, switching back to OET lets you focus on real-life writing tasks.
And feedback is gold. We're all a little blind to our own mistakes, so having a teacher or even a peer review your work really speeds up improvement. Looking back, it's clear that OET isn't about shortcuts. It's about practicing the actual skills you'll use as a healthcare worker, reading policies, listening to patients, explaining things simply, and writing clear letters.
Exactly. And by starting with a mock test, building basic skills through IELTS when needed, and focusing on clarity for speaking and writing, anyone can move toward that grade B.
And honestly, prepping for OET is like prepping for your real-world job. The habits you build now will help you long after the exam's over.
Couldn't agree more. Let's talk about how OET Bank can support listeners as they work toward their goals. If you're aiming for an overseas healthcare career, don't hesitate to reach out to OET Bank. We offer guidance, tailored practice, and resources designed to make that grade B not just a hope, but a realistic achievement.
And sometimes, just having a community that understands your journey makes all the difference, especially when the road feels long. Whether it's questions, practice, or encouragement, we're here for you.
So, good luck to everyone listening. Remember, every bit of effort now brings you closer to your dream career abroad.
Thanks for tuning in, and we can't wait to celebrate your OET success stories.